Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the webinar, Doing Data Right, Doing Data Together, Doing Data Better. My name is Lucy Wakeford. I'm the Director of Programs at Digital Leaders, and it's my pleasure to be chairing this session. Before I introduce our presenter, I'd first like to recap the topic, just to give anyone who might be running late a chance to join. Research Data Scotland, which launched in September 2021, is a collaboration between the Scottish Government, Scotland's leading academic institutions, and public bodies which aim to facilitate insight from data to support the public good. In this talk, the audience will learn why and how RDS was established, how RDS works in collaboration with data owners to help researchers deliver work which will have positive outcomes for society, how ethics, honesty, and transparency are crucial to engaging the public's trust, how data is accessed in a secure environment, and what the data landscape will look like in the future in the public sector. The second thing I'd like to do is to let you know how to ask a question, which we encourage. Please enter your question in the Q&A window, and I'll collect the questions during the presentation to ask in the Q&A in the last 15 minutes. The session will be fully recorded for you to watch back at a later time and share. I'd now like to introduce Roger Halliday, who will be taking us through today's webinar. Roger is the Scottish Government's Chief Statistician and CEO at Research Data Scotland. In fulfilling the role as Head of Profession, the Chief Statistician works closely with senior statisticians who work in the analytical services divisions of Scottish Government directorates. Roger started as Chief Statistician in November 2011, and before that, he worked in the Department in Health in England as a policy analyst managing evidence for decision-making across NHS issues. He qualified with a degree in statistics in 1993 from St Andrews University and joined the government fast stream as an assistant statistician. He worked for various UK government departments and at the Scottish Government in a number of statistical and policy-making roles. His areas of expertise are around transforming services with data, and he has experience working in the fields of health, children, learning, skills, and the economy. So Roger, it's time to hand over to you.
Okay, well, thanks very much, Lucy. Yeah, like Lucy said, today what I want to do is just give you a bit of a feel for what Research Data Scotland is about, why we're investing £25 million in this in government in Scotland, and how that will contribute to our aims of making data-driven innovation systematic across the country, and where we're at and kind of what we're doing next. I guess to start with a bit of context. This sort of why are we thinking about it in this way? And well, none of the problems that we've got in society today are going to be solved by an individual organization, an individual team in an organization. They require collaboration, whether that's climate change, whether that's about child poverty, whether it's about creating sustainable green economies, whatever it might, the thing might be, we need collaboration across people, but we also need collaboration across data and evidence. And actually, that bit of it, the data and evidence bit, has been really hard, actually, because generally, as many of the people on the call will appreciate, data in the public sector or in the private sector, wherever, is tended to be collected by individual organizations or by teams in organizations and held very securely within those organizations and not shared more widely, the value of which therefore is locked up in individual organizations. But I think that if we are going to unlock the value from data, we need to have a pretty firm foundation to do that on. And how we're thinking about this in Scotland, and I suspect it's the same elsewhere, is to think about it in two levels. One is a sort of foundational layer where we're getting the legal basis, the ethical basis for things right, making sure that we've got proper information governance arrangements, around there. And then making sure that the data is of good enough quality to work to particular standards, and that the people working on that data have got the right skills, and the environments that we have for holding that data are really secure, and then can be connected. And all of that, of course, needs to be and engender public support. So that's the sort of foundations that we have. Then I would say that's not enough by itself. We need to have a zone where we're using data in a productive fashion. So that's really spaces that we can collaborate across organizations and between organizations, and around common data sets, and to then create innovation, to do research and development that will then lead to whatever we're working for: improve public services, net zero, sort of higher value jobs, and so on. And so it's these two layers, the foundational layer and the productive layer, that we need. And Research Data Scotland is really kind of spanning a bit of both of these, because it's, as I will say, it's going to be about organising our data and creating a space for that innovation to happen. So an example of this that I'd like to talk through is one about health and homelessness. And we've been, as Lucy mentioned, one of my roles is the Chief Statistician for Scotland. So I see a whole load of statistics, and we collect a lot in government and elsewhere in the public sector in Scotland. And homelessness is one of those areas. So we've been collecting data for 20 years, and each year the numbers on homelessness perhaps go up or they go down. But we've had like individual records of the individuals and families that have been homeless, suitably anonymized, for 20 years, and haven't really done all that much with it. But when we started to, it started to show some quite interesting things and to unlock the value from it. So then the first thing that we did was to put the 20 years worth of data together and look at how many people that covered. And actually it covered a lot of people, and like Lucy said, I've been the Chief Statistician for 10 years for Scotland, and this statistic is one of the most significant that I think I've seen, and one of the most sort of worrying too. So 400,000 people is 8% of the population of Scotland who've experienced homelessness at one time or other over the 20 years. Then, because we've got the individual level data, we could connect that with other services to say, well, actually, we know who's been homeless. So what do we know about them? Well, one thing that we were able to do and do in partnership with the University of Glasgow was to understand how people that were homeless were accessing healthcare. And it turns out that, not surprisingly, they were really struggling, particularly for primary preventative healthcare services. And that was leading to all sorts of bad things happening. And so, there's the potential for using that data to influence and shape services. Then what we did was, in actually looking at just sort of piecing that linked data set together, brought it together with some other data as well, and saw that actually there were some quite strong predictors and patterns in that data to identify people at higher risk of being homeless. So the first one is that people were out of work or they had lost a job, and that they then went to their GP with either a mental health problem, a drugs or alcohol related problem, and that those things in the kind of year ahead of being homeless were quite strong predictors for about half of the people that became homeless, or half the someone in the family of being homeless. And then I think domestic abuse was the other significant predictor for around another quarter of people. So actually, got a pretty good idea of some of the real strong predictors. Well, actually, all of that analytical work's massively insightful. Could really use it, but actually, just the analytical work on its own hasn't actually stopped anyone from being homeless. Hasn't improved anyone who's homeless's care or their well-being. Which is why I've put a line 3/4 of the way up. It was only when we partnered not only with the university but with the NHS, with local government, frontline workers, managers, and government officials as well. Then brought together the thinking about, well, actually, how could services change? That's when the data and analytics there drove innovation in services. And actually, what's been tried in Scotland is an intervention where if you present to your GP with mental health, alcohol, or drugs problems, then there's a little wee bit of first screening that you do, and then if you're seen as high risk here of becoming homeless, then there's further interventions that you receive, and actually those have been shown to be very effective at improving people's healthcare, stopping people being homeless, and at saving the exchequer money overall. And it seems like a really quite a powerful example of where data has really saved time, money, and lives. The only difficulty being that that's an example, and what I don't see is data-driven innovation being systematic. But what I do see from the range of examples that I've been involved with is where data-driven innovation works best. And I would pick out these 4 things. So the health and homelessness example is that preventing uneven outcomes, preventing bad things from happening. But there are other complex problems where data-driven innovation can be extremely important. Things like climate change, things like child poverty. These require data from a range of different places, and that actually without data we're not going to solve those things. So definitely complex problems, preventing uneven outcomes, repetitive tasks where actually you can use data to refine those things really can be important, and also making data open to empower others. Definitely worked with communities where have helped them access, use data to set priorities for community development that have transformed what they do. And without the data, people have been unable to bid for money, secure funding to drive change. So I would say that those are the 4 areas where I see data-driven innovation working best. And what I see, though, is it only really works best if you get the right team together, if you understand the problem, and if you can really get to what's the information product that you need that will inform that will inform that change. So if you're going to be doing data-driven innovation, make sure you understand those things, and make sure that you have the necessary partners with you, with people that will not only just understand the analytics, but people that will be able to develop and implement the business change that's required to make those make things better in terms of the service that your organization is providing, or maybe somebody else's organization is providing, and to do that in ways that are iterative and are really properly tested. So I'd say that in terms of where I see data-driven innovation, those are the key components of that. So where does Well, I'll say something about where Research Data Scotland then can help data-driven innovation in a second. Because I think in Scotland we've got, and I'd probably say that this is true more broadly across the UK, we've got some fantastic data. We've got lots of academic expertise, and we've got expertise in particular areas. And in Scotland, I pick out those three areas that I've got here: space, fintech, and health. And what we can do in Scotland actually is bring together those multidisciplinary teams to drive data-driven innovation forwards. And we've got a pretty good scale for testing approaches to that. So the kind of data, the scale that we're operating at means that we can assemble data pretty quickly. But in terms of that cycles of data-driven innovation take too long. So the health and homelessness example that I talked about, that took maybe 2 years to go from somebody having the initial idea to somebody having those insights before even sort of the real world testing went on. And so those processes take too long, and that's because our data, while it's excellent data, isn't always well organized, and the processes by which accessing that data, they've been traditionally, too complex and take too long, and also, researchers haven't been able to see what data, or analysts haven't been able to see what data we actually have, and that means that unlocking some of that just really is quite difficult. So the thing is, if we do that, if we're able to make data-driven innovation systematic, address some of those barriers, then some really good things that can happen. So this is the Scottish level data, £1 billion saving for the public sector and 20 billion for the economy. And I've seen a number of reports that say just very slightly different numbers, but they're all big numbers, and they're all, I think, achievable. So where's Research Data Scotland going to come in to achieving this vision of moving from individual case studies where data has saved time, money, and lives to something that using data is a systematic approach that we use? Well, what we're aiming to do in Research Data Scotland is to do two things. So we're aiming to organize the data that we have across the public sector so that it can be connected around people, places, and businesses, and that we then enable access for researchers to that data where their research is in the public good. And so what that means is for researchers and analysts that you can you can access not just the data that you hold, but you can bring that data and connect it in with other information. It means that you'll be given advice on projects, and that whole process should be quicker and simpler. And similarly, if you're a data controller, it should reduce the amount of times that you're asked for your data by a whole range of different analysts, because all of that prep work has been done by Research Data Scotland. And so then, with Research Data Scotland, we're essentially we're set up as a company and a charity, but we're providing system leadership to a whole range of different organisations. So we're a company owned by Scottish Government, Public Health Scotland, National Records of Scotland, and the University of Edinburgh. So EPCC is the Edinburgh Parallel Computing Centre. That's part of the University of Edinburgh. We've also signed a collaboration agreement with 4 university NHS collaborations called the Regional Safe Havens, based in Aberdeen, Tayside in Dundee, Glasgow and Lothian in Edinburgh, to connect some fantastically rich healthcare data with data that we have more broadly, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then we're working with organizations like the Office for National Statistics as part of their integrated data program, with the focus on starting on connecting data held in Scotland on businesses and data held by the ONS. And a sort of key element of what we're doing has to be based upon the trust of people and the public in particular. We've got a set of principles that I'll outline in a second, but essentially we're absolutely committed to embedding the engagement with the public as a part of all we do, and that's in kind of sort of three respects. If the public is, so far what we found is the public will be supportive of what we're doing if these three conditions are met. So the research is in the public interest, that we have a very secure process for making sure that no one's data is identifiable or fiable, or the data is compromised in other ways. So really strong on privacy, and that we're very open about what we do, and we're looking to move to a position where it's clear for everybody that accesses data, who's accessed data, for what purpose, and what data sets did they have, and when did they have that access. So that's our working with the public, and the core principles here then. So I mentioned that the research has to be in the public good, that we don't identify individuals, and we've got a way for handling that and still connecting data around a person, place, or business, and that we don't the data doesn't leave our secure setting. So yeah, and you can read the other core principles. This is all about engendering trust from the public. So where are we just now? Well, we've got about 35 data sets. It's edging up to 40 now, data sets about people in Scotland, and that's mainly about the healthcare that people receive. In COVID, we brought together data on COVID testing and vaccinations, together with vital events, and we've got data from the 2011 census, and we'll get the data, I'm hoping, from the 2022 census when that runs. We'll get that data next year. We've got a lot of data about children, so their education, social work, and we're working on some other data around justice as well. And so all of that's able to be connected, and we've got things like the ability to create data about households from administrative data about individuals as well. And yeah, and like this slide says, there's a lot of demand for what we've got. We've got more than 600 current inquiries, and so yeah, that's pretty good. And people can now, I mentioned earlier on that organizations just couldn't see or researchers couldn't see what data people have. Well, these 35 data sets, you can find what data we do have at findresearchdata.scot website. And so that's an iteratively developing set of data catalog. Essentially, the priorities that we've got for going forwards. The number one thing that I hear from researchers is that we want this to happen faster. We're spending too much time on trying to access data. So the number one thing that we want to do is simplify that process, and we've got work in train to make that happen. Then once we've done that and we're confident that we've got the processes as slick as we can, then we're sort of reaching out to a range of other users and to really advertise the service more broadly. And at the moment, we're in the space where we're keen to collaborate with people. So if you're on the call now and you're interested in coming to work with us, then I'm really keen to do demonstrator projects, perhaps with the data that you bring. Perhaps it's about accessing other bits of data. Be really keen to hear from people to show the value of what we're doing. And then once we've done that, we're looking to develop a set of new services. So one of those would be a service to be able to measure impact of public sector or third sector interventions by organizations being able to bring their own data of who they've been working with, and us to be able to connect that in securely to public sector data and understand the effects that the programs that people run are having. And running throughout all of that is some work to widen the range of data that we have available. So I'll just briefly say that we've got a data strategy that's based around 5 themes, and that's broadening the data that we have on equalities, vulnerable people, inclusive growth, health and well-being, and the environment. And then it's also about getting together some core national data sets. So I've already mentioned we've got the vital events and census data, and we've got a number of data sets on universal services such as schools and healthcare and social care. But we've got more to do on the business side. We're just getting into that, and property ownership and land ownership. And we're looking to bring together some high value pre-linked data sets. So we've got one already on COVID public health. We're developing a data set that combines a range of administrative data and census data on it's a protected characteristics qualities research data set. And the aim with that is to enable public sector organizations or researchers to understand the equalities dimensions to what they do. So public bodies being able to understand the extent to which their services, the access to their services or outcomes from their services are equal or unequal to drive improvements in inclusion of the services. So we've got our eyes on getting some pre-linked data sets that are going to be of high value to people. So in terms of what specifically we've got, these are the data sets in dark green that we've already got. The ones in light green are the ones that we're currently working on, and the ones in grey are the ones that we're going to be working on over this year. So there's a whole range of different things. So our particular focus for this coming year is on justice services through the Administrative Data Research Scotland ADR Scotland programme. And then I'm expecting a focus on homelessness and on post-16 learning as well. So that's that. And the other thing I mentioned, we were looking to make the service much faster. Well, we've got a new approach to information governance that we've agreed, and we're taking out to data owners. And this is to bring us in line with what's happening elsewhere within the UK, built upon the 5 SAFEs framework of safe data, safe environments, safe projects, safe people, and safe outputs. And it's quite a proportionate approach to how we manage risk here. So we're going to be working with the independent panels that look at information governance to help them to to make this process even slicker than it is just now. Then I want to mention just finally before I finish some of the things that we're doing to improve the service or simplifying the access to data. So I'll just pick out a couple of things here, because this is essentially a picture of the process that people go through to access data. So they go through a discovery phase, feasibility, they apply for access to data, that's reviewed, and then that's set up there. So this year we're going to be, I mentioned we've already launched a metadata catalog and be developing that. That's findresearchdata.scot. That we're looking at how we might bring in synthetic data as an offer for researchers, a standard, so that as you're going through that process, there's some essentially data that you can play about with and discover, and to develop code with that then you can apply to the actual data when that's made available. But it should significantly improve people's experience. We're digitizing the process of application and simplifying the flows of data behind the scenes to make things more straightforward. And then we're developing then the analytical environment in which people actually access the data. And there are a range of other things that we'll get to after that, but that's our real focus for the coming year. So, like I said, yeah, I'm really keen to connect with people that are interested in working with us in Research Data Scotland. Either that's because they want to connect their own data, because you work in a public sector organisation, third sector organisation, or in an academic team, and to demonstrate the value of bringing data together across different sections. So if you want to get in touch with me, then please do at roger.halliday@researchdata.scot. And that that's me. Essentially, I think we've got to the place now where everybody recognizes that we've got some fantastic data, and that actually our job now is to unlock that data. And I think that Research Data Scotland can have a significant effect on that, making things simpler and faster for researchers, reducing the barriers to entry, so that more of us can save time, money, and lives with data. Thank you, and I'll let's get into some questions.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Roger, for that insightful presentation. It's been really interesting to hear some of your learning, some of your expertise, to hear about some of the projects. So thank you. We do now have time for some questions. There are a few that have been sent through, but as I mentioned, if you do have a question, please send that through to me now on the Q&A tab. Otherwise, you will have an opportunity to carry on the conversation later at publicsectorinsight.digileaders.com. So there's plenty of questions here. We've had one from an anonymous attendee saying, how will RDS engage with the public during its development?
Yeah, so I think that there's a couple of different ways. So we're working in partnership with a number of organisations across the UK, led by Health Data Research UK, HDR UK, that includes the NHS, the Office for National Statistics, and the Alan Turing Institute and others. And that's really about how we get across essentially what we're doing and what we're not doing here with data. So I think that the fact that we can partner with people and operate at scale there to really get out what we're doing. So that's the sort of communications bit. I think in terms of engagement, we've already been engaging with a range of public panels, and that's to check out things like our approaches and changes to what I was suggesting around data flows and around information governance. So it's really any changes that we have been proposing for the service are checked out with public panels, and that's kind of led on to further engagement exercises that we've done. But what we want to do, and we're working with some of my colleagues in Scottish Government and with other partners around Scotland, is to put in place a sustainable, ongoing process of public dialogue around data, and that'll be. I'm anticipating that being multifaceted in this approach, but it's not. It's kind of in development at the moment, and we're just using, for now, we're using a range of established public panels to test our thinking.
Excellent, thank you. Well, I guess that does kind of lead on to the next question. We've had two people ask this. Ian Green is asking, how will the public know data is being used, how data is being used, sorry, and what the intended public benefits are? And then there's another attendee who's asking, how will public good be assessed? So do you have anything to add there?
So the last of those questions is probably one of the most difficult ones that we get. So I'll touch on that first, and then I'll come to Ian's question. So at the moment, what happens is that there's an independent scrutiny of any use of data for research purposes, and that's done through a number of panels of experts essentially working in their field. And what they do is they get some information from the researcher who describes what the potential benefit is and what the data sets they're using, and then an assessment of the risks to privacy are made, and an assessment of the public benefit is made, and then a decision's made on by those independent panels on whether to allow that access to data. I think what we're talking about with the changes that I'm suggesting here, that this secure approach to information governance, is that a number of the research is broadly similar to research that's happened in the past, and where there's essentially precedent that's happened in the past, that there would be an assessment by Research Data Scotland staff. Two people independently would need to come to the conclusion that this was something that was essentially had been broadly similar to a use of data that had happened in the past and been approved by that independent panel, and where that wasn't approved by two people, that would be then escalated to the independent panel. So essentially, that's there's an assessment of public benefit. Now, what does public benefit mean? That's probably the trickiest question. So where we take our guidance from is that there was some work done over the last couple of years by the Office for Statistics Regulation. So they're an organisation that is the production of official statistics is there to be in the public good, and they were one of the first people that really had a go at defining what in the public good means. And if I get the chance before the end of this session, I'll post in the chat with the link to their findings, because they've publicly made that call. So I won't go and try and describe that here, but I'll let you read that more broadly. And then to come to Ian's question, how will the public know how data is being used and what the intended public benefits are? Well, this is an area where we're moving to. We're not in a position quite yet to do this. So we've been currently kind of reacting to people asking for that information, because we hold it and we've made it available under Freedom of Information. in the past. But what we want to do is to move from there to a proactive publication of who is accessing what data sets, for what purpose, so what's the public benefit that that they're seeking to achieve, and when that access is over. So that's the intention is that we're looking to move to that as part of this transformation that Research Data Scotland is leading.
Excellent, thank you. Great answers to those two questions. There's another question here. Who will be able to access the data?
Yeah, and that's another good question, because so to access the data, I mentioned there's we're working to this 5 safes principle in terms of controlling access. Well, you have to be a qualified, secure researcher. So you have to do some. You have to be working for an organisation that has got research as part of its core. You need to have done the safe researcher training, be an accredited researcher on the UK Office for National Statistics training course, and that's a sort of a particular group of people, and so yeah, I would say, yeah, there's layers to this, but I would say that's the key thing.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for that question. So what does information governance actually mean? Another question there.
Sorry, I should have been a little bit clearer in terms of what I was presenting here, because I suppose information governance is just another term for the making sure that we've got the controls, or that the owners of data have the controls in order to be able to keep that data safe. So they've got a legal responsibility for keeping that data safe, but they've also got a responsibility to share that data where that can be of public benefit, where they can avoid situations that can cause harm. And so information governance are the arrangements by which that sharing, under which that sharing occurs or does not occur, and the decision making around that.
Great, thanks for that clarification. There's another question, got lots still to go. How will RDS ensure that data is accessed securely? So
we're working, like I said, with the University of Edinburgh. So there's a few layers to this. So I mentioned we've got 5 SAFEs framework. So there's secure settings, and the University of Edinburgh, they run they run a very secure computing facility called a National Safe Haven, which is not connected to the internet, for example. And so that's one way that they keep it secure. But they've got the staff in that are really very well, they're experts in managing data, and they manage data for all sorts of different organizations across the UK and more widely. But we then have processes by which we keep the data secure beyond that. So first thing that we do is we split up data between, well, say we don't, the owners of data, whether it's, say, for example, it's data on schools that the Scottish Government have. They might have data about the individual, the identifiers about individuals, and they might have data about the characteristics of individuals. Well, the processes that we have make sure that no one beyond the owner of data sees both of those, the characteristics of people and the people's identifiers. And we use the National Records of Scotland, who have essentially a record of everybody in the country to help with that matching process and keeping that the data split into identifiable and characteristics data, which which make that which is another layer of security that's absolutely vital to keeping data that's access safe.
Okay, and I guess a related question then, what is your approach to the anonymization of data? Is that done by the data supplier? And if so, how do you provide consistent reference data to suppliers to support this and the eventual data matching?
Yeah, so I think that was, again, that's in the process that I've just described is a basic approach to de-identification. I guess it's not anonymization of data. In theory, someone, if they were, could in theory put data back together for an individual if they had able to bring in their own information. However, as I mentioned, we've got the 5 safes principle that's adopted across the world, and that you have to be a qualified, secure researcher to access this, and that and secure outputs is one of those 5. So any outputs that come from from researchers moving from the data, people can't move the data from a secure environment, but they can move outputs from a secure environment. And before they do that, there are a range of disclosure control checks to make sure that anything that comes out of that secure environment cannot then tie back to an individual. So there's checks and there are things throughout the process to keep people's identity secure.
Great. Okay, thank you. So 2 last questions. To start with, have you looked at any approaches that allow data suppliers to maintain management of the data they supply to RDS?
So I guess what we're not doing is taking away the responsibility of the data owners to continue to develop and to use their data in the environments that they hold it. So Scottish Government and education data, some of my analytical colleagues in Scottish Government will continue to use that data in their Scottish Government environments. But if they want to connect that to health data, then they'll need to come through Research Data Scotland. So I'm not anticipating that taking away any of the responsibilities of data owners. What we will be doing in the way that we bring in data is providing feedback on an anonymized basis, because we won't have the identities of individuals, but feedback to data owners to help them improve the quality of the data that they hold. And I think that's the key feedback loop, or the key role that in relation to what was being asked there.
Okay, great, thank you. We just had another question come in. I think we've got a little bit more time. So one from Rob. Hi Roger, thanks for the fascinating talk. If you could solve one problem with data access to make the most immediate impact, what would it be? Great question, Rob.
Yeah, that is. And I think the key thing for me is that the key thing is that the time that it takes and the effort that it takes to actually access data, Rob. So, and I think I hate to say there's more than one thing, but there's the information governance arrangements for this, but there's also the organization arrangements of data. So us doing some, in Research Data Scotland, doing pre-processing on that data to make it available, and providing things like synthetic data to make it available quicker to researchers. So in the health and homelessness example, that it took such a long time because even with the information governance approvals, it took 6 months to then go back to the local government and say, right, this is exactly the data that I want from you. and the health people, this is exactly the data I want from you, and to get that combined in ways that preserve anonymity and then served up for the researchers at the University of Glasgow, that took 6 months. Well, I think we can do that. We can do that almost instantly, but we've got to do the pre-processing on that. So to be proactive rather than reactive, I think, is the space that we're in there, Rob.
Okay, great, thank you. And final question from Druv. Coming from the perspective of a development team, what would you say is a great way to get into using your data for commercialization?
Yeah, so, well, I would say, number one, that, you know, Research Data Scotland's to be there for research in the public good. So sometimes there'll be a public benefit, and so there will be a clear demonstrable public good. So, for example, the development of vaccines, for example, for COVID would be an area where we'd need to work with private sector organisations. Now, what in Scotland, there's not quite the kind of rules around that are still being developed. There's an expert group that's looking at this at the moment, and we're expecting to have the outcome of that over the next few months. And that will give the kind of rules of kind of a Scottish policy position on working with commercial companies. But I suspect that there'll need to be something in that space about benefit sharing. But the terms of that, I'll wait for that independent expert group to give, and then we'll, within Research Data Scotland, we'll be very keen to work with private sector companies that are working in the public good, and if they can demonstrate that that's the case.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, we are out of time, unfortunately, so thank you all so much for tuning in, and thank you so much to Roger for such an interesting and informative session. The recording of this will be on publicsectorinsight.digileaders.com on the same talk page that you registered on, and you'll also be emailed a link to the recording later on today, and you'll be able to share that link with colleagues and watch it back at your leisure. So thank you, Roger, again, and we look forward to seeing you all soon.
Thank you.